Hey everybody, let's go ahead and get started with this analysis. So I played the white pieces against DrFURY, who had the black pieces, in the first round of the Lichess 45 plus 45 league. So I start off with pawn to d4, d5, and bishop f4. This is the London system. Black responds with c5, and this is a strong move. It has multiple reasons to why it was played. One, it's contesting the center. It's putting pressure on this pawn. And also, there may be threats of queen b6 targeting this weak b2 pawn, because when I moved the bishop out of the way, it unprotected this pawn. And in some lines, if the queen is able to come down here, the rook is also undefended and may be trapped in some lines. So I need to be cognizant of that, and that's why I played c3 to allow for queen c2 in the event of queen here to queen b6. Knight c6, e3, getting ready to develop our pieces, and bishop f5. Preparing to play e6, and having the bishop be outside of the pawn chain is good, because if the bishop is inside the pawn chain when e6 happens, this light squared bishop can be awkward at times. I play knight d2 here, because if queen b6 were to happen, I can then play queen b3, and if queen takes, I have my knight that can take back without ruining my pawn structure. Pawn to e6 was played, and I played knight to f3, developing my pieces, getting ready to put my bishop on e2, castling, and then going from there. Now, black responds with c4, and to me, it looks kind of weak. It can be a target. I can eventually play pawn b6 and contest this pawn. It's a pawn break. But I didn't play b3 right away because I was afraid of bishop to a3 followed by bishop to b2 to trap my rook, because this bishop also defends the square and this bishop will defend this square, so my rook would have nowhere to go. And that's why I wanted to prepare b3 by playing queen c1. Queen c1 guards this square, so it will prevent the bishop from getting access. Black plays knight to f6, and I play b3. I continue with my plan. Black responds with pawn to b5, and here I play bishop e2. I don't want to capture, it would ruin the tension. I just wanted to play bishop e2, castle, and go from there. But here, black makes a choice. He offers an exchange of bishops, and here I think it's a good idea for me to trade, because once I take, I can then target this light squared bishop with the knight. So I take, queen takes, and then knight h4. And now the bishop has nowhere to go. It's going to be exchanged from the board. And right now this bishop is super powerful, so I'd like to get it off. And that's what happened. Bishop here, and I capture. And pawn takes back. Now I have to be super careful. This rook is on an semi-open file, and this queen is also here. So if I make the mistake of castling, I lose right away. Queen takes h2 is checkmate. So obviously I don't castle. Instead I play knight f3, guarding this square, and then allowing me to castle in some lines without getting checkmated right away. So knight e4 was played, and here I play queen c2 to put pressure on the knight, as well as put my queen on a more active square. Now black plays king e7, which I think may be a mistake. I think it would have been better for black to just castle, because I have no immediate way to attack. But I guess black wanted to double up on this file and attack me somehow. But I think king e7 is too weak, because it just weakens the king side, and it proved to be a target later on. So here I take and take back, and here I have a tactic. So I take here with the bishop, and you may think this is a free bishop, Corey. What are you doing? Well, when the pawn moves, the knight is under attack, and I would gain a pawn out of it. So if pawn takes, I would take the knight, and I would be better here. So instead, what black does is capture the pawn on f2 to avoid the material imbalance, but I simply capture the knight with my queen, and then after pawn takes bishop, the pawn is no longer on a center square and is no longer controlling the center square. So I have dominance over the center, and black's pawn here is isolated and a target. So I play queen e2, targeting this pawn. Black has to defend the pawn somehow, or he'll just lose it. And he chooses to defend the pawn by playing knight a5. Knight a5, it's on the rim. Knights on the rim are dim. And the knight is pretty awkward. It doesn't have too many other pieces to go to, too many other squares to go to. It's playing a very defensive role. So I decide to activate my knight, like castle, and then just put pressure on this file. And I really like my position here. It also attacks the pawn. So if black doesn't do anything, I would grab the pawn, knight takes, queen takes, and I would be up a pawn. So queen goes there to a3, targeting this pawn here on c3. If I don't do anything, the queen will capture the pawn with check and then capture the rook. So I don't want to lose the rook, so I castle. And black played this move, rook a f8. I don't quite understand this move fully. So I take the pawn because it's a free pawn. I didn't see the point behind here, and I figured a pawn is a pawn, may as well take it. So I take, and queen takes here. But now I activate my rooks. I play rook c1, queen b4, followed by rook b1. And now both of my rooks are in very nice files and have a lot of dominance compared to his rooks, which are pretty not as much active. So queen goes there, and that allows me to take the knight. And the reason why I captured the knight is because it will allow me to play rook b7. Right now the knight is guarding the square, but once I capture it, that will allow me to go to that 7th rank and really target the king. And that's exactly what happened. The king goes down, which is a mistake due to what I played, which is queen f3, preparing for checkmate. There's so many different ways to approach it. I can go here, I can go here, I can go here. It's just a very deadly attack, and the computer actually gives this a checkmate in 10. But alternatively, if black were to go up, it's also not good because I have this move here, and he would lose the queen for the rook. And alternatively, if black plays here, I can do a number of things. I can either play here, I can double up, I can put my queen on this file. It's just not good for black, but I think black made a huge mistake by playing king d6 because it allowed for queen f3. Now, rook c8 was played to attack the rook, but I don't care. I'm going in for the kill. I play queen f4, check, and now there are two moves. There's either king down or pawn down. If pawn here, I will simply capture the pawn with check. Notice how it's with check. If it wasn't with check, I'd probably lose with rook takes rook. And then if queen takes pawn, then I have some nice moves. I have some options here. I can play rook here. I can win the queen, but it may be simpler to just keep the attack going with like rook here, and then king here, and I don't know. The attack will continue for sure. But that's not what happened. What happened was he played king d5 and blundered a mate in 1. So I have two ways to do it. I made the move queen e5, but alternatively there was rook here, which is checkmate. So I played checkmate and the game ended. So that was the first round of the Lichess 45+45 League. Off to a great start. Let's see how we do in future rounds. Thanks for watching.